thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson-Miller. So there's been, might you say, new energy or certainly new information injected into the decades-old debate on abortion in Jamaica following a report by Capri that made a number of recommendations that have been, shall we say, coming across with some amount of controversy. We're going to be exploring those and getting views on them in a little while, a little later in the program. But first, though, with COVID numbers spiking, the Prime Minister yesterday in Parliament announced tightening of measures to try to stop the spread of COVID-19. We're joined at this time by the Health Minister, Dr. Chris Tufton. Dr. Tufton, thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Let me start off with the issue of the measures, because between yesterday and today, we've been speaking to a number of business people who are very concerned about what's going to be happening to business, saying they do completely understand the public health imperatives here, but on the other hand, they feel that there are other options that are not being explored. Speaking today, for instance, with William Mafood, Mr. Mary of Restaurants of Jamaica, as well as Mr. Mitchell of Island Grill, they were saying things like, what about improving the ticketing system? What about better enforcement? What about allowing delivery rather than taking this kind of measure that we know is going to be so very hard on local businesses?
Right. So I respect the comments made by the private sector. In fact, we've been working with the private sector to try and ensure that the partnership is strong, because we do need all hands on deck, and there are many advantages to that partnership. In terms of the restrictions, we have found that the most effective way to pull back and to minimize or restrict the spread of COVID-19 is to restrict movement. I mean, the disease profile is one where movement is really what causes the spread. And of all the tools in our toolkit, the restriction of movement and by extension, the use of curfews has worked in St. Catherine, where we had to do it. It has worked in Westmoreland in most recent times. And as a consequence, given the numbers that we have had, we felt that it was necessary to do that, even though we are not closing the economy or shutting down the economy. Now, it's not to say that some of those other suggestions don't have value. And these are things that we need to look at. We need to look at greater enforcement, and we need to look at a number of other things. But frankly speaking, we needed a method at this point in time that was effective, known to be effective. And unfortunately, even at the cost of business activity, we needed to deal with the public health issue because of the high levels of positivity in the population.
Couple of things, Dr. Tufton. First of all, you say we do need better enforcement. We're nearly a year in, though. So when are we going to see this better enforcement?
Let me say something, Dion. The reality of the situation is there will not be enough policemen or policewomen, to enforce persons who are set on being deviants in the population. We have a fairly extensive public health team, 320 health centers, 17,000 employees across the country. And our observation suggests, or should I say conclusively states, that too often there is absolute disregard for the protocols. And I don't know which army or which police force can enforce it. So while I think we need to be more rigid and we need to set an example of those who ignore the protocols, the absolute reality is that Jamaicans need to appreciate the importance of the role that they need to play to protect themselves. And we need all voices supporting that narrative. And I think that's something that we have to continue to push for, because that is the main challenge that we face.
Okay, let me just ask you, I know you're on the go and you're busy, Dr. Tufton. Let me just ask you, just adjust your camera a little bit if you could. Just pull it down
Okay.
towards you, whether it's your laptop or your phone. I suspect it's your phone.
I'm on my phone because I'm on the road.
There you
Sorry.
go. We understand. Just pull it down a little bit more. We do want to see you when you talk, seeing
Okay.
that it is TV.
All right.
Couple of things though, because you said the suggestions made by the business leaders are not without merit, but this has been found to be the most effective way, except you haven't really tried the other ways though. So ticketing, for instance, I mean, in terms of serious enforcement of mask wearing, that's not done. The issue of leaving open, for instance, restaurants, allowing them to deliver and so on. So you're saying that the suggestions are without merit, but the go-to is the curfew and the tighten the curfew and the tighten the curfew, as opposed to seeing whether or not these other measures would have the desired impact as well.
Right. So the ticketing is something that we're working on, the Ministry of Justice
It's been
and
a
local
year, Dr.
government.
Tufton. It not take that long to bring legislation to Parliament when the IMF was holding the whip over us.
I know it does take some time, and I can't
Not when the
give
IMF was
you
on our backs, didn't.
I
So
can't give you a
record-breaking legislation
justification.
being passed when the IMF was in charge.
Right. I can't give you a justification for the length of time, but I know that both ministers are working diligently. And I'm told by Minister Chuck that something should be in Parliament in the next week, 2 maximum. So I'm looking forward to that myself, because I do believe that we need to utilize that option. The issue of delivery is something that we have discussed. And, you know, I can't give you a reason why it is not implemented. It's something that we need to put back on the table. But I will maintain that the most effective method is to just tell persons to stay off the streets and stay at home after a certain time. And that has been the most effective approach. And as a consequence, we had to go that route, given the 400 plus that we have seen over the last day, and the 15 or 1700 over the last less than a week. I am hoping it won't last beyond the 2 weeks. The Prime Minister was clear that we have to move the levers to get the results, but it's about balancing lives and livelihoods. So we don't want to do it. But frankly speaking, Leon, we have to take the decisions that are going to protect lives in the first instance, because without lives, we won't have the livelihoods.
All right, couple of things, because I'm running out of time. One of the other proposals we got yesterday from Keith Duncan of the PSOJ, supported by public health experts, Dr. Figueroa and Dr. Bailey, was that Jamaicans coming back into the country, not just tourists, should be mandated to have a test before they come in. Why aren't we doing that?
Well, the reason for that in the initial stages was that we wanted to give an opportunity. Well, we felt, and some felt on the diaspora side, that you would be breaching the constitutional rights of Jamaicans who wanted to return home by placing a barrier in terms of cost of testing before they got into the country. So we felt we could have freely introduced that to non-Jamaicans, but for nationals, we needed to, give some leeway and instead replace it with the quarantine arrangements. So as you know, persons who come in who are nationals are required to quarantine for 2 weeks. The challenge that we have faced is that too many Jamaicans who come back to Jamaica are not following the protocols around quarantining. And that has been a real issue for us.
Let me ask you to hold on that point, Dr. Tufton, because the blame is always placed on the people not following the protocols with regard to quarantine. We spoke yesterday to one Jamaican who said the ministry did absolutely nothing that she was told would have happened when she came in quarantine and went into quarantine. I think we have a clip. Let's just listen to a very short clip from that interview.
If I were not the person I was, there appeared to be nothing in place that would have prevented a breach of the quarantine requirements. Okay. Nothing at all.
All right. So when Keith Duncan is talking about more compliance, more enforcement, you're saying in some way the quarantine system needs to be part of that as well?
For me, yes, because there are persons who may not have tested as many times as I did. I have a child and I also work in education, so I was personally concerned and I was being extremely responsible. I had my son stay with his father for the 2 weeks, and I did remote classes as well for that period. But there were persons who literally at the outside of the airport were saying, what are they talking about? I'm here to the road. And that was the attitude. So you do know there are persons who are coming in who would possibly be spreading the virus by who they interact with. And there was nothing in place that I saw, and honestly, this is just from my experience, that I saw that would have enforced any of these requirements that were put in place, especially that quarantine order. It really did give you a sense of fear and awe, and that is how I entered the country, but then absolutely nothing.
Nothing after that. And this was about when?
So this was December. I came in on January 10.
All right, so about a month or so ago.
Yes.
Okay. Right, so Marilyn had said the Jam COVID app never worked. She said she couldn't upload the video she was asked to upload. She said every time she tried to contact somebody on the numbers or whatever she had been given, she couldn't reach anybody. She said the first time she heard from anybody was the 15th day when she had returned to work and the ministry called her and said, oh, you can go back to work now. So, I mean, it just seems like we put in place these systems, Minister, for optics, and there's nothing behind them. And then we say, oh, people aren't adhering when the part of it that the government is supposed to do isn't being done either.
Well, let me say a couple of things to that. First of all, that's the particular view, and I have no doubt to doubt her testimonial.
You want me to do a whole program of people who have been through that, Dr. Tufton? Because I can.
But the truth is, I can find many persons who have been through the process, who have written to us, who have said the process has worked, that the app has worked, it has checked them every day, that persons who have been apprehended for breaching the quarantine, persons who have been placed in state quarantine because the app sort of caught them breaching the quarantine arrangement. So not suggesting it's a perfect system, but it has worked in many cases. Dion, let me just say this, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. With all the challenges that we face as a country, we have done better than most in terms of managing the spread of COVID. Now, we have a spike now. It's not the first time we have had a surge, and we have to do what we have to do to pull back so that the public health system is not overwhelmed. The ultimate solution, of course, is getting the vaccine. That's another conversation. But I would not say the system is perfect, as any system across the world is not. But I think it has worked for the most part, and we are better off for it as a people. So it's really just to get the word of persons like the lady who was speaking, correct where we have problems, and continue to build the process to make it more foolproof. And I think we are willing to do that. That's the attitude of the government, frankly speaking.
All right, I'm out of time. I'm going to have to leave it there for this evening. As always, Minister, we have so much to talk about. We have so many more questions to ask.
Despite your being a hard taskmaster, I'm always available. You know that, right?
That is correct. And I thank you so much for your time this evening. We appreciate it.
All right, all the best. Bye.
All right, Health Minister Dr. Tufton talking to us there. Take the break. When we come back, then we will start on the abortion and the debate and the recommendations made by CAPRI. Reactions to that will soon come.